Hello, welcome back, everybody. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with Pastor Clarence C. Moore, the senior pastor of the New Era Church in Indianapolis. And Pastor and I are going to be having a conversation today. It's now March 10th, 2021, of taking a serious look at where we are now in the COVID-19 pandemic, what we've lost, what we're looking forward to, and what it means to both the pastor and the people in his life. So, Pastor, I'm going to ask if you would sort of start us off by telling me a little bit by what's happening in your community today, how COVID-19 is affecting the people in your life.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity, Rabbi Julie. The crisis is still very large here in Indianapolis. Our biggest task right now is trying to get all of our citizens to take advantage of the vaccine. And so we've been on a journey with my own church, trying to convince our members to, in the words of the very popular Broadway play, what am I trying to say? Hamilton, don't throw away your shot. And so that's what we're trying to do. Don't throw away your shot. And so my medical personnel at my church are spending a lot of time on the phone with our members, trying to get them to first understand that they too had some trepidation, even as medical professionals, and that they overcame that trepidation by doing their research, and then they took the shots. And so I've had many members let me know that as a result of our conversations with pastor and the scientific community and our health officials that they sit in church with every Sunday, they're now wanting to take advantage of the vaccine. But too many are still hesitant.
Pastor, that is just a brilliant way of putting it. Don't throw away your shot. And what I'm especially inspired by is, of course, Hamilton is a play that talks about very tumultuous times in terms of people organizing themselves in a way that will be good for everybody, and all that people go through, including with a lot of attendant losses, personal and communal. And I know that, across the houses of worship and communities of faith in our country, there have just been so many stories, so much has gone on in people's lives. Could you tell me a little bit, perhaps going back, we've now, past the year mark, one or two or more of the stories personally to you about COVID?
Yes, it has struck home, not only in our congregation, but me personally. The COVID-19 pandemic not only shut us down, being able to gather and fellowship together for the last 12 months. I think this week we've been out almost a whole year. But during this time, we lost two precious members. I lost a mentor and a mentee. Christmas Day, we lost one of my ministers, my prayer minister, 38 years old, a wonderful husband, incredible father. And he died Christmas Day. Our hearts were saddened in so many respects that he and his wife had adopted three children. And they had adopted children who were in a very difficult environment. They bring these kids into their home and they finally have some stability. COVID comes along and takes away the father. That has been so heartbreaking to me and to our congregation. And then 2 weeks after that, my mentor, 95 years old, healthy, mind still good, had a nurse aide to come in to help. And the nurse aide, not knowing she uh, had the virus. He caught it from a nurse's aide, and 2 weeks later, he's gone. And so within a 30-day period, I lost two incredible, wonderful, godly men, and their families are still trying to adjust to their loss.
Mm. Tell me a little bit, those are just such powerful stories, such tragic stories. Tell me a little bit about, even from a distance, what your church is doing to help the people those we lost left behind.
Good. We have bereavement teams that are in touch with these members, especially the young widow who has 3 children now, and it was such devastation. The day that her husband died because of the virus, no one could come to her rescue. Her own parents couldn't come, and so we are trying to minister to her through Zoom. And so now that's what we continue to do, is to try to reach out, make sure we're okay. She's always getting stuff on the doorstep from members of our church, which is such a blessing. And we're now trying to educate her and the other families with the FEMA assistance that they have announced to help those families who lost loved ones to COVID. We're trying to make them abreast and helping them access the funds to help offset the cost that they had to pay in order to bury the loved ones.
Pastor, you mentioned several very important things, and I just want to sort of highlight each of them. In addition to, of course, just the immeasurable, the infinite value of the lives that are lost, and I want to talk about that some more. At the time that your mentor passed, when he got COVID, there wasn't a vaccine available. And
Exactly.
I myself also know a number of people where, unknowingly, their caregiver who loved that person, cared for that person, unknowingly was carrying COVID and, brought it into the house. And so you raise a question that I want to come back to, which is, how can we help those people who are caregivers, healthcare workers, to sort of understand, what this means, the significance of this for the population. And I also, you're telling a story that I'm hearing in a lot of places. One of the great told and untold stories of the pandemic is how crucial houses of worship are during this time, because of course, these are where we have our face-to-face relationships, right? This
Yes,
is where
exactly.
people know people.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, could you tell me a little bit about, for other people of faith out there in their community, any ideas that you could share about how people can get started in their community, educating people about what's available in terms of aid, in terms of vaccines, et cetera? What do you find is working the best?
Yeah, I think that one of the missions of our church at this point in time is to be in prayer and purposefully supporting all of those on the front lines of this virus, and especially the many nurses and doctors that we come in contact with, because the emotional toll that they have. Oftentimes, you're busy doing the work, and it really, it adds up, and it becomes to the place where you go through a sense of mental anxiety, and I've had to deal with that. We've got some strong doctors and nurses that I'm affiliated with, but we talk sometimes, and so we're trying to make sure that they have some accessibility to some mental health. The second thing we're doing is trying to make sure that all of the resources that we can think of that is available to, we have so many single mothers during this crisis that are trying to do virtual learning. They're trying to keep down jobs. And that is a incredible toll. And so we are putting funds out so that we can maybe be able to assist these families in some of the financial difficulties they're having, which helps a whole lot. We have a lot of online services that we're putting on. We have a mental health professional in our church that is doing some mental health sessions online with those that would tune in, which has been really incredible. I personally am involved in a movement here in the city. The Red Cross in our state contacted me to kind of speak on behalf of trying to get our community to get in line for this vaccine. And so I'm personally involved. The mayor's office called, wanted to take a shot with me. The mayor was too slow. I had to get my shot as soon as I could. And so when he called, I'd already had my shots. But just to tell you the influence that New Era Church has in the community as it relates to COVID-19. Now, I am concerned about the availability, the accessibility, and then the acceptability of this vaccine. To me, that's three different tiers. I realize the availability may not quite be there yet. I do know, though, that once the availability and the volume is available to us, I'm concerned about the accessibility. Can our people get to it? And then the third, which I think is third, I don't think it's first, is the acceptability, people that will accept and get in line for the vaccine. So those are the three things that we are watching here, making sure that all three of those steps are, moving in the right direction.
If there were, I love the way you put that, availability, accessibility, and acceptability. If you were kind of constructing the plan for accessibility, right? And you said, I'm in charge, I'm gonna, come up with the plan that I think is going to create the most accessibility. What would you do?
So I'll tell you what I would do. I would set up stations east, west, north, and south in the African-American community and the Latinx communities, in churches and in those medical centers that are closer to the people. And so I believe people will come and walk around the corner to a local church and take a shot. I would move the volume or to make the availability closer to the people. That's what I would ask, and that's what I'm going to be asking. The other thing I would do is I would push in most of the African-American communities the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, mainly because it's what? One shot. And the efficacy of that shot still keeps our people out of the hospital and keeps them from severe illness. But I think that because of all the other barriers and inequities that my community faces, if I can just get one shot in their arm, they're trying to get them back for a second shot might be a challenge. But if I can get one shot that's going to be efficacious, that's what I would be pushing. So it would be pushing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, bringing them to the local churches in the African-American community and the Black and Brown communities.
Do you see, that's so wise. Do you see movement happening to sort of perhaps bring more shots to houses of worship in your state? Do you think that is
not
coming
yet
down the road?
I hope so. I want to be in contact with the Marion County Health Director to have that conversation. I'm pretty sure, those three steps: availability, accessibility, and then acceptability. I still think we're in the availability struggle right now, making sure we have enough vaccines. I think eventually, I'm thinking maybe by the end of March, we may have enough availability. Then we got to figure out, okay, what's the accessibility? And that's the step I want to talk to the Marion County health people about. And then we'll fight the acceptability a little later once we get the availability and the accessibility figured out.
I think that's so insightful. And I think, we try in these conversations to stay really timely. And I really appreciate that right where we are today, right, having that clear vision and clear strategy for how to help the greatest number of people is very powerful. I
Yeah.
want to also ask you, Pastor, we are, as you point out, sort of just on the cusp, right, of certainly having the availability, right? We have a lot to do on the accessibility. And in some ways, the question I have for you is, what does that mean for the families of over 500,000 people? 500,000, more than 500,000 Americans who had these losses that, but for a few months, a few weeks practically, that perhaps things might have been different. How do we cope with that?
Yeah, that is such a quadrum, spiritually and emotionally, for me personally, because of losing my mentee and my mentor 4 months before the vaccines kind of start rolling out. And I always talk about the why of life. Why did it happen like this? And so we're dealing with that in my own personal time with God as to why a young man who was about to become a pastor, the church was really getting ready to call him to be their pastor. He dies 2 weeks before the church makes their decision. And then a few months later, here comes what could have saved him. And so trying to deal with that is on my own personal level. I'm still grappling with that and still trying to figure out how I'm going to deal with it. But I know their families are dealing with that. And that's one of the tragedies of this terrible journey we've been through with this virus in so many levels. It has been so detrimental to families, to fellowship, to so many levels of our society. I'm hoping that Rabbi Julie, that this pandemic has awakened people to realize the fragility of the human life, and that we do need to spend our time loving one another, because our time is short and life is so uncertain. And so now I'm trying to grapple with if we could have just got that shot in the arm earlier. That is a real struggle for me.
Pastor, people of faith, each in our different ways, we sort of try to look ahead to a sense of purpose. Sometimes we can see God's purpose in things that happened, and sometimes we only know purpose by kind of stepping forward and making that purpose, right? Making what we do purposeful. And I'm wondering if, looking across your life, across your career, at some of the high points, right? The great things that have happened, and maybe things that we've lost a little bit, right? In terms of how we're living together, how we're getting along, what we're accomplishing. Are there certain things that you can look ahead and say, you mentioned one, right? We want to really appreciate life. We want to really appreciate each other. And it's so powerful. I just want to ask if there's anything more. If we look ahead a year from now, looking back over the past year, it's been a time of great pain. If we look ahead 1 year, 2 years, what would you like to see as some of the ways we work together to give meaning to what we've been through?
Yeah, I think that going forward, I hope that we realize that leadership matters. Whether it's your church leadership, whether it's where you work, whether it's in government, leadership matters. And I pray and hope that as we pick leaders in the future, that we try to choose individuals who are selfless and not selfish. I think that the other thing is when I look at the culture as a whole, we are becoming so selfish. And I think the whole not wearing a mask is deeper than just freedom, because the mask wearing is also about your neighbor. Oh, I'm okay, but I want you to be okay. And it's just, we become so selfish. I'm hoping that through this time that we understand leadership matters, that we can be a little bit less selfish, and that we can find ways to get in proximity with people that are not like us, that may not look like us, that may not believe like us, but find ways to find some commonality. I think proximity is one of the reasons that we're so polarized, is that we just don't spend time getting in other people's shoes and other people's lives enough to really see that, my wife said something to me just the other day, as you think about this pandemic and how it has disproportionately affected the African-American community and the Latinx community. She said, honey, the only difference between us and white people is that thin layer of skin. That thin layer of skin. And it causes, I mean, look at what's happening with the whole issue with the family over in England. Just that thin layer has caused so much division and polarization that I know is not of God. And so I'm hoping that we can find ways to come together across, religious lines, gender lines, political lines, and find ways to make this the beloved community that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about.
Pastor, that is a vision for the ages. It is a vision for today, and it is a vision for the ages. I want to ask you, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you really feel is an important lesson that you have that you'd like to share with other people who will be listening?
I would like to be very transparent to those that are hesitant about taking the vaccine because of misinformation. And that is, I have one question, and that is, do you know of anyone who died of COVID? Okay. And do you know of anyone that's died from the vaccine? I think the former question, you would say, yes, you know of someone that's died of COVID, but have you heard of anyone that's died of taking the vaccine? So why sit in the assembly where you could be exposed to a very deadly virus that's going to not only affect your personal life, but it's also going to affect the loved ones around you? Take your shot so you can be with us for weeks and months and years to come, and we can enjoy life together again.
Well, Pastor, I'm going to close with my prayer, which is that God willing, soon and speedily we'll be in a time when we can travel and I can travel, and I want to come and see you on a Sunday.
No, that'd be a blessing.
And sit in your church and be with you to pray and listen and share. And this has been a great conversation. Absolutely. And I thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you so much.